Hello, hello to all of our newly admitted Tritons for fall 2020. Whether you are joining us from inside of the US or from the other side of the world, on behalf of the International Students and Programs Office, also known as ISPO, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Pauline de Guzman, and I'm the Manager of Student Services here at ISPO. A few housekeeping items before we begin today. First, you're on listen-only mode, so you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Next, we're recording. This webinar will be posted at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. And lastly, please ask questions. You can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen to get your questions answered. Even if we aren't able to answer them today through our chat or during the Q&A if we have time at the end of our session, we will do our best to make sure we provide answers by updating our coronavirus FAQ page for newly admitted students. Also joining me today, my colleague Joe Peters, who will be chatting with you through the Q&A function. So go ahead and submit those questions there. Now, today's session will cover working in the US for undergraduate students. Today, we'll be talking about employment eligibility for both F1 and J1 students, working on and off campus during your program, after your program, working after graduation, as well as providing you with resources related to employment eligibility and preparing to work on and off campus. Throughout our time together, I may ask you some questions, so pay close attention. Locate the raise hand icon to stay engaged. So that's at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and raise those hands for me and let me see that you know exactly where they are. Okay, great. Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's take a look at employment eligibility. International students in F1 and J1 status are eligible for various types of employment while here in the US. We differentiate your type of employment, either if it's being done during your academic program or if it's being done after your academic program. So we'll talk about both the types of employment that are available to you during and after today. But I want to show you all first a timeline of what a typical student's work situation looks like here at UC San Diego. Newly admitted students generally arrive in the US and start their program of study in the fall. So you'll see here fall 2020. Once a student arrives, they are immediately eligible for on-campus employment. Okay, and we'll go over what is considered on-campus employment. But generally, as soon as you start your first quarter here on campus, you are eligible for on-campus employment. In order to be eligible for off-campus employment, and we will also talk about what off-campus employment is, students are generally required to complete at least one academic year. So that's considered 3 quarters. So you'll see here the student enrolled fall quarter 2020, winter of 2021, and then spring of 2021. And then they started off-campus employment in their first summer, so summer of 2021, after completion of 3 quarters. So generally, yes, students need to enroll full-time for 1 academic year, which is known as 3 quarters, before being eligible to work off campus. And then finally, when you complete your program, you realize you're in your final quarter, you start thinking about what you want to do next after graduation, you can apply for post-completion work authorization, or basically work after graduation. So you can see that here in that teal area, where the student is then working after they complete their program. Okay, so we will talk about those 3 types of employment today. So before we jump into that, before you start any type of work, it's really important to know what kind of work authorization do you need, okay? So some types of employment do not require authorization and are incidental to status, which means as long as you are maintaining your F1 or your J1 status, you're following all the rules required of you, and you're an active F1 or J1 status, you don't need permission from ISPO or the US government. You can go ahead and work. Some types of employment require authorization or permission from ISPO, okay? And this is in the form of ISPO printing something on the second page of your Form I-20, or maybe the first page of your DS 2019 saying you are permitted to work. Another type of work authorization is recommended by ISPO, but actually authorized by US Citizenship and Immigration Services, also known as USCIS, which is essentially the US government. So it could be different types of work authorization, but before you start, it's important to know which one you need, and so you understand the timeline, how long it takes to get it, and when you can begin working. So let's talk about our first type, which is on-campus employment. As an F1 or J1 student, you are eligible to work on campus, okay, at your first quarter here at UC San Diego. On-campus employment is defined as work on the school premise. And if you are employed by your I-20 or DS 2019 issuing institution. So that is UC San Diego. You'd have to then work on UC San Diego's campus. Some examples are working at Geisel Library, or dining or residence halls, or maybe doing some research in a lab. So those are some examples of working on campus. In addition, you can work on campus and be employed by an on-campus commercial firm that provides a direct student service. So for example, it could be an employment opportunity at one of the restaurants inside of the Price Center. And the Price Center, for those of you who have not yet visited campus, Price Center is located on campus here at UC San Diego. Okay, so let's take a look at this first what would you do box. Is working at Starbucks at Price Center considered on-campus employment for international students? Go ahead and raise those hands if you think yes. Okay, so yep, you're right. Working at Starbucks, which is at the Price Center, is considered on-campus employment because Starbucks is located on campus. I do want to point out that it doesn't mean that you can work at Starbucks, which is, you know, across the street from campus. Even though it's close to campus, it's still not on campus. So you would not be able to work at that Starbucks. However, since this Starbucks is on UC San Diego's campus, it is considered on-campus employment, and you may engage in on-campus employment. All right, so let's take a look at on-campus employment a little bit more. We just went over that, yes, you can work at Starbucks, and on-campus employment does not need to be related to your program of study. Okay, so obviously if you are allowed to work at Starbucks making coffee, I highly doubt any of you are majoring in making the perfect cup of coffee. So as a reminder, on-campus employment does not need to be related to your program of study. During the academic year, which is the fall quarter, spring, as well as winter, you may work up to 20 hours during the academic year. This is considered part-time employment, up to 20 hours. Okay. Of course, the summer winter and spring breaks, these are not required. You are not required to enroll. And so you may work more than 20 hours since you're on vacation. You're not enrolled full-time in classes. So now let's look at work authorization. What kind of work authorization do you need to work on campus? Now, as an F1 student, you do not need permission. This is incidental to your status. So as long as you're maintaining your F1 or your J1 status, you do not need to ask ISPO for any type of permission. You don't need work authorization as an F1 student. However, our J1 students, in order to work on campus, you do need a permission letter. This letter is authorized by ISPO, and you can apply for it by logging into the iPortal. Okay, so make sure that you have your permission letter from ISPO prior to working on campus as a J1 student. And again, for F1 students, if you find an on-campus opportunity, you may go ahead and accept it. No permission needed. If you are accepting a paid employment opportunity, then note that you will need to apply for what's called a Social Security number for U.S. tax purposes. We'll talk about your Social Security number, which we also refer to as your SSN. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But just note that for on-campus employment, if it's paid, you will need to provide your hiring department with your Social Security number. All right, so what is different about fall quarter and 2020 in general, right? On-campus employment during COVID-19. Remote work, is it allowed? So when we talk about on-campus employment, we generally think working on campus, on UC San Diego's campus grounds, right? But with the pandemic this year, U.S. Immigration and the Student and Exchange Visitor Program has released some guidance regarding remote work. And it is allowed for F1 and J1 students who are outside of the U.S., as well as if you're here in the U.S., but wanting to take an on-campus employment opportunity and work remotely. What we would suggest is that you work directly with your hiring department and to make sure that the kind of work that you're doing can be done remotely. If it does require that you, for any reason, come on campus, that you understand those requirements and practice social distancing and other campus safety protocols. Some considerations if you are working on campus this quarter, but you are outside of the US, is how will you get paid? So if you have not yet entered the US, you don't have a Social Security number, you don't have a bank account set up, you need to work directly with your hiring department on campus and let them know these details. You can let them know, I'm not yet present in the US, I don't have all these details, what should I do if I want to accept this on-campus employment? So be transparent with your hiring department, and they can support you moving forward. And again, work authorization is the same. F1 students don't need permission, J1 students do. Just work closely with your hiring department on campus. Oops. All right. Okay, so we've talked about on-campus employment. Let's now move on to off-campus employment, okay? F1 students in their academic program of study will generally request off-campus employment in the form of what is called curricular practical training, or CPT. And we go over CPT. We will reference CPT quite often. You're going to hear us say, "Oh, are you going to do CPT? Are you going to apply for CPT?" Just know that when we refer to CPT, it is referencing curricular practical training, which is off-campus employment for F1 students. For J1 students, off-campus employment authorization during your program of study is called pre-completion academic training. We also refer to this as AT. Undergraduate students may only work up to 20 hours during the academic year, again, fall, winter, spring. However, during summer, which is not required for enrollment, and winter and spring breaks, you are able to work more than 20 hours since classes are not in session. So let's take a closer look at off-campus employment for F1 students first. Again, also known as CPT, you will first need to meet these eligibility pieces in order to apply for CPT. So the first one that we have here is received offer from employer. Okay, you do need to have received an offer letter from a U.S. employer. And they should have given you an offer letter saying, you know, you're going to start your employment this fall quarter and so forth, and kind of have all the job details of your position entailed listed in there. Okay. CPT is also linked to a course or participation in a quarterly program. So each quarter you are applying for CPT, or each quarter you'd like to work off campus, you'll need to ensure you are either enrolled in a course and will receive credit, or if working over the summer, participating in some sort of cooperative program in lieu of registration. So again, since course enrollment is required, you'll need to apply for CPT every single quarter that you want to work off campus. So something I want to point out is a lot of students find really great internships, and sometimes it spans over 2 quarters. So let's say you get a great internship from Tesla, and they're offering you a position from October 20th of 2020 until March 20th of 2021. Right, these dates overlap fall quarter and also winter quarter. So you will need to apply for CPT twice. You'll need to submit an application for fall quarter, and you'll also need to submit an application for winter quarter. Okay, so just note those details. Okay, so the third piece is holding an active CVIS record. Activation of your CVIS record requires that you have begun your program in the US, okay, and that you have physically entered the US. So for those of you who are starting your program remotely, you're starting your program from outside of the US this fall quarter, you will not be able to activate your CVIS record until winter quarter or spring quarter, basically when you enter the US. If you are physically here in the US already, starting your program this fall, or you plan to arrive soon before the fall quarter starts, then remember that you are required to arrive to campus before October 16th. And the way that ISPO will know to activate your CVIS record is by logging into the iPortal and submitting the fall 20 check-in request, okay? When you submit that request, we will then activate your CVIS record. Okay, the next eligibility piece here is work is related to your program of study. So unlike on-campus employment where you can work for Starbucks, off-campus employment must be directly related to your major and your program of study. So if you are planning to work at Starbucks, okay, off campus, then the position that you hold at Starbucks, which is off campus, let's say there's a Starbucks at the University Town Center, UTC, which is a few miles away from campus, right? It's off campus. If you work at Starbucks, then you better be, let's say a financial analyst there, which is related to your major as a math major here at UC San Diego. So just note that whatever kind of work you do needs to be directly related to your program here at UC San Diego. And the last piece, which is here in gray, which is a really important piece, is that you have had to have met the 1 academic year requirement. Now, this requirement is that you have enrolled full-time for at least 3 quarters on the same CVIS ID number in active status. Okay, so this can get a little bit confusing, but basically you should have already arrived to the US. We should have activated your CVIS record. You should have enrolled for 3 quarters full-time on that CVIS record before you apply for off-campus employment. And you all remember our example at the beginning where the student waited 3 quarters first before they started working off campus. So this is another requirement of CPT. So as soon as you meet all 5 of these pieces, you can then apply for CPT directly in the iPortal. CPT is authorized directly by ISPO. So on the second page of your I-20 will reflect authorization for CPT. Okay. For our J1 students, the same things apply. You should have already received an offer letter. You should be enrolled in credit. You should hold an active CVIS record, and your work has to be directly related to your program of study. However, instead of needing to enroll for 1 full academic year, or 3 quarters, you only need to enroll for a minimum of 1 quarter. Okay, so J1 students only need 1 quarter before they can start working off campus. And likewise, academic training off campus during your program is authorized by ISPO. So log into iPortal and apply for CPT or academic training from ISPO in the iPortal. Okay, so I want to show you really quickly on your Form I-20 and your Form DS 2019 where we would reflect that. So on the second page of your Form I-20, you'll see a section called Employment Information. So the top of your second page of your I-20. If you are approved for CPT, this is where we will add that information. We're gonna put your employer name, the address of your employer, the dates you can start working, and the date you must stop, and if it's full-time or part-time. You need to wait until we provide you with an updated I-20 to begin working, okay? So make sure that you have that I-20 in hand before you start working. You'll look for that information there on the second page. For our J1 students, this will be located under, I think, section 7 or so, but in the middle of your DS 2019, we will also reflect academic training on your Form DS 2019. And likewise, please wait to receive your DS 2019 showing academic training reflected on there before you start working. Okay, so I want to get an idea of what you've learned so far. So let's watch this quick video.
I guess I can take random jobs like babysitting or driving Uber, since they're not real jobs anyways.
Okay, what do you all think? Can you all babysit? Okay, so that is definitely false. Okay, so as we learned earlier, again, remember your work off campus needs to be directly related to your program of study. Okay, so no Uber, no babysitting, none of those jobs. If you find a job and you want to know if maybe it is considered off-campus employment, if it's considered something that you need authorization for, you can always come and talk to an ISPO advisor. We can help you determine what kind of authorization you need. Okay, so again, we're in a very special year, right? Let's talk about CPT eligibility during COVID-19. So the two pieces that are impacted by the pandemic are basically students' abilities to get their CBIS record activated because they're not physically here in the US. And then it also impacts the ability for them to start accruing time towards the 1 academic year requirement. So again, the 1 academic year requirement, you can only start accruing time once you're here in active status, right? So those two pieces are impacted heavily because of COVID-19. So some of you might have already started accruing time towards the 1 academic year. And I'll give you some brief examples of how. So if you transferred your CBIS record to UC San Diego, so let's say you started your first 2 years perhaps at a community college, and then you transferred as a junior here to UC San Diego to finish up the last 2 years of your undergraduate program. If you transferred that CBIS record to UC San Diego, you may have already met that 1 academic year requirement, as long as you've enrolled 1 academic year at your previous institution. Also, if you changed status recently, so you held like a H4 and L2 or a different dependent or a different non-immigrant visa, and you recently changed over to F1, if you had enrolled 1 full academic year in that other non-immigrant status, you might have already met the 1 academic year requirement. We might also have students who changed academic level here at UC San Diego. If you're starting a new program here at UC San Diego, common example is those who complete their undergraduate program and then begin their graduate program on the same CBIS record. So these are some examples of how students might have already started accruing time towards that 1 academic year requirement. If you plan to start your program inside of the US this fall quarter, so you're physically here already, or you're planning to arrive before October 16th, and you will be in the United States as you begin your fall quarter, then this is what your timeline might look like in order to work off campus. You'll see here, you've arrived in the fall, so ISPO can then activate your CVIS records starting fall quarter. Okay, so you'll then enroll 3 quarters, fall, winter 2021, and spring of 2021. And then you'll see here in summer of 2021, you would then be eligible for off-campus employment. However, for our students who are starting their programs remotely this fall quarter and planning to join us in person in the US in the winter or maybe spring of next year, we would then not be able to activate those CVIS records until your arrival. So let's say we activate your CVIS record when you arrive in winter of next year, winter 2021. Then you'll wait your 3 quarters. So there's winter of 2021, spring of 2021. Summer is usually a vacation quarter. So if you'd like to enroll full-time in the summer, which is 6 units each summer session, you can count summer as a full-time enrolled term. However, most students want to hang out and kind of enjoy their summer, and then they'll use fall as the 3rd quarter and full-time study, and then start working off campus as early as winter of 2022. So I hope this demonstrates for you, depending if you are here in the US this fall quarter or starting your program remotely, what your eligibility and timeline looks like to start working off campus. Okay, and please submit those questions through our Q&A chat so that Joe can answer those for you if there's anything we need to clarify today. Okay, so we've discussed working during your program through on-campus and off-campus employment. So now let's pivot and let's talk about what work authorization you will need if you would like to work after graduation. Okay, so after you're done taking all your classes, F1 and J1 students are eligible to remain in the US after their program of study to apply for work authorization after completion of studies. For our F1 students, the type of work authorization that you will need if you would like to remain in the US and continue working after graduation is referred to as optional practical training, otherwise known as OPT. So you'll hear us refer to this a lot as well, OPT. Just know OPT refers to working after graduation. This is generally a 12-month period of authorization. If you are a STEM major, you may be eligible for an additional 24-month extension in addition to the 12 months of authorization for OPT. OPT is recommended by ISPO. However, the final authorization and the final approval is from USCIS or US Immigration. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth. For our J1 students, the type of work authorization you need after graduation is post-completion academic training, also known as AT. The authorization varies in length, but it's usually the same number of months as your J1 program. So if you were here on a J1 program for 3 months, then your J1 post-completion academic training will also equate up to 3 months. This might be different for our graduate students, however. However, since all of you are undergrads, that is the note to take away. Unlike OPT, academic training is authorized by ISPO. So J1 students do not need to submit anything to US Immigration to apply for academic training after graduation. So let's take a look at eligibility for OPT for our F1 students. Okay, so unlike CPT, right? CPT is working during your program off campus. You'll notice here that you do not need a job offer letter to begin your application for OPT. Okay, you do need to be inside of the US at the time that you file your application. But again, you don't need an offer letter. So even if you don't have a job yet, you can go ahead and you can already start applying for OPT. So the reason for this is you need to be in a specific window to apply for OPT. The general steps is that a student will first figure out, okay, what is my final quarter at UC San Diego? Okay, you can apply for OPT. You can apply to work after graduation up to 90 days prior to the last day of enrollment at UC San Diego in your final quarter. So usually students who graduate in spring quarters, which is in the middle of June or so, they'll start applying for OPT as early as middle of March, which is about 90 days before that last date of enrollment here in their final quarter. You can also apply for OPT up to 60 days after the end of your last date of enrollment. So you have this 5-month window, 90 days before your last date of enrollment and 60 days after. This is known as your OPT application window. And so you have to be within that application window in order to apply. Again, you must have an active CBIS record. Your job has to be related to your program of study when you do find one later. And also you have had to have met that 1 academic year requirement, okay? And again, it is recommended by ISPO. So on the second page of your I-20, like I showed you earlier, we will recommend that you apply for, we'll add a notation saying we recommend the student applies for OPT. However, you will take that I-20, you're going to mail it to US Immigration along with some other documents, and they will be the ones to approve it for you. That process does take some time, which is why we suggest that students apply 90 days before their program start or their program end date. Okay. For our J1 students, the application window is a bit different. If you're a J1 student, you actually need to apply for academic training before the program end date listed on your DS 2019, okay? This is because academic training is essentially an extension of your program end date on your Form DS 2019. So again, if you're a J1 student, if you want to work after graduation, you need to apply for academic training before the program end date. And the same rules apply for academic training. You have to have an active CBIS record, work needs to be related to your program, and you have to have enrolled for that 1 quarter. Unlike OPT, again, academic training is authorized by ISPO, so no needing to mail anything to US Immigration. So let's look at your timeline for applying for OPT for F1 students, okay? You find out spring of 2021 is your final quarter here at UC San Diego. You'll see that since you arrived here in the fall, you've already met that 3-quarter requirement. And then if you'd like to work anytime after graduation, you will need to have applied for OPT in order to work, okay? After the end of your program, if you have not yet applied for OPT, you may not work after graduation. And so I encourage you all to visit our vanity links, which is opt.ucsd.edu, to learn more about that process. The same with our J1 students. If you want to learn more about academic training, visit at.ucsd.edu and also cpt.ucsd.edu. So we have those links available if you'd like to review these types of employment opportunities for you. Okay, so our next what would you do box. I can continue to work on CPT even after I graduate and complete my program. Raise your hand if you think, yes, you can work on CPT after graduation. Okay, so you're all right. As a reminder, you cannot work on CPT after graduation. CPT, also known as curricular practical training for F1 students, it can only be done during your program of study. If you would like to work anytime after you graduate, you will then need to apply for a work authorization through OPT. Okay, great. Okay, so I want to go ahead and talk about your social security number now. If you are authorized to engage in paid employment, okay, any paid employment, your employer, whether it be on campus or an off-campus employer, will request your social security number or your SSN. You will need an authorization letter from ISPO, okay, which you can apply for in the iPortal, and so that you can take that authorization letter and apply for your SSN. You're going to take that authorization letter, or you're also known as your SSN support letter. You're going to also take your proof of paid employment and work authorization to the Social Security Administration. Okay, they are a office off campus. It's a government office off campus, and you will submit those documents to their office, and they will be the ones to issue you your Social Security number. I want to make a point that ISPO does not issue your SSN, okay? Again, ISPO does not issue your SSN. We will provide you a support letter, which you can then take to the Social Security Administration office, and they will then provide you with your SSN number, okay? I want to point out that obtaining a Social Security number is not the same as having work authorization. Okay, so a lot of students always ask, oh, I have my Social Security number, does it mean I can work now, like anywhere I want? No, that's not what it means. So having an SSN is great. However, it should only be used when paired with proper work authorization through either on-campus employment, CPT, AT, or OPT. So if you don't have on-campus employment, CPT, AT, or OPT, and you're using your SSN to work through other means, then just note that that is considered unauthorized employment, okay? Another point about your SSN number is, while your work authorization, such as like CPT, it'll eventually expire, right? Since CPT is only valid per quarter, your SSN is a unique number. It's permanent and will never change. So if you've already been issued your SSN, which is this 9-digit identification number assigned by the US government, then you don't need to apply for a new one each time you obtain work authorization. Your SSN stays with you for life, okay? Okay, so let me just test your knowledge really quickly about your SSN.
Now that I have a Social Security card, I can work anywhere, anytime.
Okay, what do you all think? Yeah, that is definitely false. She was so excited. So just as a note, remember, you cannot work anywhere, anytime just because you have an SSN. Make sure you're using your SSN when paired with proper work authorization. Okay, so we are nearing the end of our session today. I want to go over now just some support services available to you. When you start looking at employment opportunities, where should you start? So everything that we mentioned today, your SSN support letter, applying for CPT, academic training, your OPT recommendation, those are all going to be done through ISPO's iPortal. So go ahead and log into iPortal.ucsd.edu and locate those request types there when you are getting ready to submit these applications. When it comes time for you to begin your employment search, okay, just know what resources are available to you here at UC San Diego. So the first that I want to point out is our friends at the Career Center. It's a great place to start. Some departments even have their own career advisors. So check with your department specifically if they have one to help you plan for pursuing those types of internships or opportunities in your specific industry or field of study. Of course, you have us, ISPO, right, to help you with understanding the immigration piece and the work authorization piece. You also have your college advisors who will help you figure out when are you going to be graduating, so you can kind of map out your timeline. And then, of course, our faculty and our alumni. Look to UC San Diego's already established network of graduates and global leaders who have paved the way for you as Tritons. So this is your support system as you begin to look into employment during your program and after your program. And I cannot say enough about our friends at the Career Center. I really encourage you all to visit career.ucsd.edu. They can help you as you begin to write your resume. They'll help you to review those. They'll also help you to write cover letters, and they'll even help you to conduct virtual practice interviews so you're ready when the time comes. They can also help you discover and search for internships, research on and off campus, opportunities in your specific field of study. They also host career fairs and virtual networking events so that you can figure out how to use those online tools such as Handshake, LinkedIn, Going Global, and Indeed to find the jobs that are right for you. Also, for our undergraduate students who are maybe looking into getting into grad school or planning to prepare for medical school, they can also help you to be better candidates for those types of opportunities after you complete your undergraduate program here. So they're an incredible resource, and they have wonderful career coaches and advisors who will help and take the time to prepare you for these next steps. So please, please, please refer to our friends at the Career Center. There are also some other experiential learning opportunities for our undergraduate students here at UC San Diego. I won't go too much in depth, but just a quick note. We have our academic internship program and our friends over at AEP for research opportunities. And then if you're a Jacobs engineering student, there is the JSOE co-op program. So those are some opportunities to look at as well as an undergraduate student. Okay, so I hope you've learned so much today about employment. Again, all of this information is available on our website at iStudents.ucsd.edu. ISPO provides updates to our students through ISPO provides updates to immigration regulations and work authorization and so forth through our website, as well as through social media. So if you have your phones out, get those out, get on Instagram, follow us at ispo.ucsd.edu, also on Facebook. We try to post as many reminders about your work authorization and maintaining your status, reminders and so forth. So follow us there. Another good tip is to download UC San Diego's mobile app, where you may also have receive updates or get helpful tools to navigate campus. And lastly, we will do our best to remind you all of regulatory updates every week through our iStudents newsletter, which you'll get through your UC San Diego email address. However, as an international student, it is up to you to know the rules, verify what kind of work authorization you need before you start working. Okay, so I think we have about 1 or 2 more minutes. I'm going to ask Joe maybe to read aloud some questions, since I'm unable to see that Q&A feature. Joe, do you have any questions? Maybe we can take about 2 or 3 questions now that you'd like to read aloud.
I had 4 open, but
okay.
Let's pick this one.
Okay.
Is the rule that for off-campus job, such as internship, needs 1 academic year applying to transfer students too?
Right, okay, that's a good question. So if you're a transfer student, and I want to clarify that you are a transfer student as in you transferred your CBIS record, then it does apply. However, you might have already met the 1 academic year requirement because you probably enrolled at least 1 year on that same CBIS number at your, let's say, community college, and then you transferred to UC San Diego, and you still have been issued that same CBIS number. So if your CBIS number is the same and you've already enrolled 1 year at your previous institution, then you, as a transfer student, you might have already met the 1 academic year requirement to work off campus. Okay, thanks, Joe. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, then the next question was asked several times, so I'll read it aloud. Can the fall quarter count towards the 1 academic year requirement if I'm studying remotely this quarter?
Okay, that's a great question. So unfortunately, if you are studying remotely, okay, and remotely as in you are physically outside of the US, then you cannot report to ISPO that you are here, and thus we cannot activate your CVIS record. So when you physically enter the US, that is when we activate your CVIS record, and that's when it starts to count towards that 1 academic year requirement. So the fall quarter, if you are outside of the US, will not count towards the 1 academic year requirement. That's a great question. Okay, Joe, I think we can do one more question.
Okay, I had a few questions about this topic as well. When applying for on-campus job as an F1 freshman coming back to campus for fall 2020, do I put yes or no on the question, are you legally authorized to work in the US?
Oh, are you legally authorized to work in the US? And can I clarify, is this a question on like UC Path, or where is this question being asked specifically? Do they indicate, Joe, in the question?
It's a returning freshman.
Okay, well, so as an F1 student and as a J1 student, you are eligible to work on campus. You do have the authorization to work on campus, but you should show your F1 I-20 or your J1 DS 2019. If you are starting your program remotely, if you're outside of the US this fall quarter, then you do not hold F1 or J1 status, so you want to talk to your department specifically, your hiring department specifically about that. Only if you're physically here in the US do you then have the proper work authorization to work on campus. Okay. All right. Okay, so thank you, Joe, for answering those questions also through our Q&A today, and then helping facilitate that today. So that's all the time we have for questions today. I'm going to go ahead and go over some final reminders. A huge part of international orientation is meeting new people. So I hope that some of you are not, if not all of you, have signed up for our meetups. We have interest group meetups, so you can meet other newly admitted Tritons who have similar interests as you. We also have regional meetups, so maybe some students who are already in your specific region who you want to meet and connect with. So please visit iorientationucsd.com/meetup where you can meet other students. And then just to get an update and know what's happening at UC San Diego all year long, we have in-person as well as virtual events that happen through iEvents.ucsd.edu. And again, our in-person events are not currently operating, but when the time comes, hopefully those will be reflected on here, iEvents.ucsd.edu. So head there for the latest. And before we say goodbye, just a few reminders. Continue to register for other orientation sessions by visiting iorientation.ucsd.edu. At the end of the session, you will get a survey. Please fill it out. Let us know how we can better serve you. Stay up to date again by visiting iupdates.ucsd.edu, checking your UC San Diego email for weekly newsletters. And then if you need to contact ISPO, visit us at icontact.ucsd.edu and follow us on social media. I'd like to thank you all for attending today's session. And again, whether you are joining us from inside of the US or from the other side of the world, on behalf of the International Students and Programs Office here at UC San Diego, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, or morning. Have a great fall quarter, everyone. We'll see you at our next session. Take care.